Christmas mornings are supposed to be magical. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifting from the kitchen, the soft crackle of a fireplace, children rushing downstairs in their pajamas with eyes wide open, searching for brightly wrapped presents beneath a glowing tree. At least that's how I always imagined it would be. But when I asked a simple question, "Where is my gift?" The room fell silent for a moment before my mother let out a sharp laugh that cut deeper than any cold December wind. She looked at me with that smile she always used when she wanted to remind me of my place. Small, undeserving, invisible. "Santa doesn't like ungrateful children," she said, her voice dripping with mockery, while the rest of the family chuckled along. I can still feel the sting of those words echoing in my chest like a wound that would never heal. That morning wasn't just about a missing gift. It was about years of being pushed aside, belittled, and reminded that I was never the favorite. It was the moment I realized Christmas magic in our house had never been real. It was a performance, and I was cast as the unwanted extra. What none of them knew was that this time, I wouldn't just sit quietly and swallow the humiliation. That Christmas would become the turning point, the start of something they never saw coming. That moment on Christmas morning never left me, because it was the kind of cruelty that hides in plain sight, disguised as a joke, wrapped in ribbons of family tradition. I sat there watching my younger sister tear through her stack of gifts, paper flying everywhere, her laughter filling the room like she was the star of some holiday commercial. My brother held up his new phone, grinning as my father clapped him on the back. I was left staring at the empty space in front of me, the bare carpet where no box, no bag, no gesture of acknowledgement had been placed. When I dared to ask the question, not in anger but in quiet hope, the entire room seemed to shift. My mom's laugh wasn't warm or playful. It was sharp, cold, meant to cut me down. And when she said, "Santa doesn't like ungrateful children," I realized she wasn't talking about Santa at all. She was talking about me, about how in her eyes, no matter what I did, I was always too much or never enough. The humiliation burned my cheeks, but I bit my tongue. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I sat there with a forced smile, pretending it didn't matter, while inside, something cracked. For years, I had accepted the role of the overlooked child, the one who got hand-me-downs, the one who was told to be grateful for what you have, the one who learned early that asking for more meant punishment. But that morning, as I watched my siblings parade around in their new treasures, I understood that my family didn't just forget me. They enjoyed reminding me of my place. That was the moment I decided I would remember every slight, every cruel word, every laugh at my expense. I tucked them away like receipts in a drawer, waiting for the day I would cash them in. Growing up in that house meant learning quickly that appearances mattered more than anything else. My mother loved playing hostess, loved decorating the house for holidays, loved showing off to neighbors how perfect our family was. She'd put up twinkling lights on every corner of the house, bake trays of cookies, and take photos for her social media to prove what a magical mother she was. But behind those closed doors, the truth was ugly. If I dared to speak up about the way I was treated, I was branded dramatic or ungrateful. My siblings knew how to play the game, shower her with praise, laugh at her jokes, never challenge her authority. They became her golden children, the ones she boasted about, while I was the shadow no one saw. I tried for years to win her approval. I studied hard, I helped with chores, I even bought her small gifts with the little money I earned babysitting. But nothing was ever enough. My mother's love was conditional, and the conditions were always changing. That Christmas wasn't the first time she humiliated me in front of others, but it was the one that lodged itself deep in my memory. It wasn't just about a gift. It was about the message. You don't deserve joy. And yet, instead of breaking me, it planted a seed. I started watching more carefully, noticing the cracks in her perfect image, the lies she told to keep up appearances. She claimed we couldn't afford much, yet there were always expensive things for my siblings. She said she wanted fairness, but fairness only ever tilted one way. I learned to collect the truth, to keep notes, to remember dates, times, receipts. At the time, I didn't know exactly what I would do with all of it. But I knew that someday, I would turn all those years of being ignored into something powerful. I would stop being the invisible child. And it all began with that one Christmas morning, when I asked a simple question and received laughter instead of love. After that Christmas, something inside me shifted. I began to see my mother's cruelty not as isolated moments, but as a pattern that defined my entire childhood. Birthdays were the same. My siblings got parties, balloons, friends invited over, cakes so large you could see them from across the street. Mine? A small store-bought cupcake with a single candle, lit quickly after dinner and blown out before anyone even finished singing. If I dared to show disappointment, the line was always the same. You should be grateful. Some kids don't get anything at all. Gratitude in her mouth wasn't about appreciation. It was about silence. Gratitude meant accepting crumbs while others feasted. Gratitude meant not asking questions, not demanding fairness, not daring to want more than the bare minimum. I learned to stop hoping, but hope has a way of sneaking back in, especially when you're a child. I remember one year, I saved for months, tucking away every dollar from babysitting and chores. I bought my mother a silver bracelet with tiny charms, a gift I thought would finally prove I was worthy. I wrapped it carefully, placed it under the tree days before Christmas. That morning, she opened it, glanced at it once, and set it aside without a word of thanks. Later, I found it shoved into a drawer, never worn, forgotten. Yet when my sister gave her a cheap scented candle, she squealed like it was the greatest treasure in the world. The message was clear. It wasn't about the gift, it was about who gave it. As I got older, the disparities grew louder. My brother got a car the moment he turned 16, brand new and shiny. I was handed bus fare and told driving lessons were too expensive. My sister was given shopping trips, spa days, even vacations abroad. I was given responsibility, babysitting, cleaning, covering for their mistakes. When I succeeded, it was ignored. When I faltered, it was magnified. My life became a careful balancing act, walking on eggshells, trying not to trigger my mother's sharp tongue or my siblings' mocking laughter. By the time I was a teenager, I had stopped confiding in anyone at home. I kept journals instead, thick notebooks where I wrote down every slight, every incident, every cruel word. I wasn't planning revenge yet. I didn't even have the courage to imagine it. But I knew I needed to remember, because forgetting meant forgiving, and I couldn't forgive people who delighted in watching me crumble. Those journals became my secret lifeline, proof that I wasn't imagining things, that the neglect and humiliation were real. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Christmas after Christmas, the tradition repeated itself. My siblings basked in abundance. My mother basked in control, and I was left with scraps. But beneath my quiet compliance, a plan was forming. I didn't know when, and I didn't know how, but I knew that one day I would no longer sit silently in that living room pretending their cruelty was normal. I knew that one day, all the years of being overlooked would turn into something they couldn't laugh away, and when that day came, it would begin the same way it always had, with me asking a question. Only this time it wouldn't be, "Where is my gift?" It would be, "Where is the truth?" As I grew into adulthood, I finally left that house, but the shadow of my mother's laughter followed me everywhere. Even when I had my own apartment, my own job, even when I was building a life outside of her control, holidays always pulled me back. Christmas became a ritual of dread. I'd show up, gift in hand, trying to play my part, only to be reminded again that I was still the outsider. One year, I bought my father a leather wallet I'd saved for, engraved with his initials. He smiled politely, thanked me once, and then minutes later praised my brother for the thoughtful tie he'd given him, calling it the best gift he'd received all day. My present was forgotten before the wrapping paper hit the floor. My sister, meanwhile, walked in with nothing but a box of chocolates, and my mother gushed over her as though she had given the world. I sat there, invisible, clutching my empty hands, wondering why I kept trying. But that Christmas morning when I asked about my gift, that one laugh, that sentence about Santa and ungrateful children, it became the crack that never healed. It grew with me, echoing in moments I least expected. When I worked late nights to pay my rent while my siblings lived at home rent-free, I heard it. When I brought home a promotion at work and no one cared, I heard it. When my sister posted online about her amazing, supportive mom and strangers flooded the comments with envy, I heard it. That laugh, that cruel sentence had become a chorus inside me. And it reminded me over and over again that I was never meant to win in her eyes. Then one December, something shifted. I came home for Christmas as usual, but I wasn't the same girl who used to sit quietly. I was older, sharper, and for once I wasn't financially struggling. I had worked for years to build myself up, saving carefully, investing when I could. I walked into that house with confidence my mother hadn't expected. The tree sparkled like always, the smell of pine mixed with cinnamon candles, and the sound of holiday music floated in the background. My siblings were already buzzing around, showing off their gifts, and I stood there watching, waiting. When the moment came, when the paper had been torn and the gifts revealed, there was nothing for me again. Just like always. And when I asked, this time calmly, deliberately, was there something for me? My mother gave the same smile, the same cruel tilt of her head and said, "You're too old for gifts. You should be giving, not taking." The room laughed again. My brother smirked, my sister rolled her eyes, my father said nothing. But inside I felt no sting. No humiliation, just clarity. That was the year I knew the cycle would end. That was the year I realized I didn't need their approval, or their scraps, or their staged holiday perfection. I had something they didn't know I had. Every receipt, every journal, every record of the lies they told to keep me small. I had years of evidence of what really went on behind the shiny lights and Christmas cards. And for the first time, I was ready to use it. I remember standing in that living room, the glow of the Christmas tree casting long shadows across the floor, my siblings laughing over their gifts while I sat in the same empty space I had known since childhood. Only this time, I wasn't a powerless child anymore. I had a career, I had savings, I had an apartment no one else had paid for, and most importantly, I had proof. Proof of years of being neglected, dismissed, and treated like less than. My journals were no longer just scribbled notebooks. They had become carefully organized files. Every time my mother borrowed money from me with promises to pay it back next week, I wrote down the amount, the date, the text message where she swore she'd return it. Every time she told neighbors how much she'd sacrificed for me, I recorded the moment, remembering exactly what was said. I had screenshots, receipts, even emails. And when she laughed again that year, when she told me I was too old for gifts, something inside me settled. I realized it was no longer about the presents. It was about power, and I was done letting her hold it over me. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the guest room scrolling through my phone. My sister had already posted dozens of pictures. Her hugging mom, Dad holding a mug I bought but credited to her, the house looking perfect from every angle. Strangers commented, "What a beautiful family. And you're so lucky to have such a loving mom." I felt the old familiar bitterness rise in my throat, but then I smiled. Because I knew the truth, and I knew I had the tools to reveal it. I wasn't impulsive, though. I didn't want a messy explosion. I wanted precision. If I was going to act, I would do it in a way they couldn't spin, couldn't deny, couldn't bury under fake smiles and social media filters. So I began a plan. Quietly, carefully, like I had been preparing for it my whole life. I started gathering the pieces, connecting the dots. The unpaid debts, the favoritism, the way she used me financially while calling me ungrateful, the way she presented herself as a saint while exploiting me at every turn. I thought back to that first Christmas, to her laugh, to those words, "Santa doesn't like ungrateful children." And I realized she had spent her life painting me as the villain in her story. But I wasn't the villain. I was the witness. And soon, I would be the storyteller. I didn't know yet exactly what form my revenge would take, but I knew this. I would not stay silent anymore. Not for Christmas, not for birthdays, not for her reputation. The stage she had built for herself, the perfect family image she paraded every year, it would crack. And when it did, everyone would finally see what I had lived through all along. The turning point came a few weeks after that Christmas. My mother called me, her voice sugar-sweet, the way it always was when she wanted something. She told me she was so proud of how well I was doing, how independent I had become, how she bragged about me to everyone. For a moment, I almost let myself believe her. Then she asked if she could borrow $2,000 to help with some unexpected expenses. I didn't hesitate, I asked for details. What expenses? Why that exact amount? She stumbled, then shifted the story. First it was a medical bill, then it was repairs on the house, then it was something for my sister's education. I recognized the pattern immediately. It was the same script she had used on me since I was 16, when I gave her my babysitting money to help with groceries, only to see her walk through the door later with new shoes. This time, though, I didn't give in. I told her no. Her tone changed instantly. The sugar melted into venom. After everything I've done for you, she hissed, you can't even help your own mother? Do you know how ungrateful you sound? That word again, ungrateful. It hit me like a flashback to that Christmas morning, her laugh, her words. But instead of shrinking, I felt something inside me harden. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I said very quietly, I've kept records of everything you've ever borrowed. I know the total. She went silent. Then she snapped, don't you dare threaten me. I didn't. I just ended the call, calm as ever. But in that silence, I heard something new. Fear. For the first time, my mother realized I wasn't a child she could laugh off anymore. That night, I opened my files and calculated it all. Over the years, she had taken more than $15,000 from me. Not loans, not gifts, money she promised to return and never did. I had the proof neatly stored, text threads, bank transfers, even notes in her own handwriting. My siblings had no idea. To them, I was just the bitter one, the one who complained too much. But when they learned how much of my life had been siphoned to keep up her illusions, they wouldn't be able to laugh it off. And I realized this was the trigger. This was the piece that shifted my anger into action. That night I made a decision. I wouldn't wait for another cruel Christmas, another cutting laugh. The next time she tried to use me, the next time she dared to humiliate me, I would be ready. And when I moved, it wouldn't be out of spite. It would be justice. The first real step happened sooner than I expected. In early spring, my sister posted a photo online of a brand new designer bag, gushing about how Mom spoiled her again. The caption made me freeze. That bag cost nearly the same as the emergency money my mother had begged me for just months earlier. She had played helpless with me while lavishing gifts on my sister, and then let the world believe she was the most generous mother alive. My stomach turned, but instead of anger, I felt a cold focus settle over me. I screenshotted the post, added it to my growing folder, and kept quiet. Silence became my weapon. A few weeks later, my brother bragged at dinner about how Mom had covered his car insurance because he was short. I watched her beam with pride, nodding like it was her duty, while I sat there remembering the years I walked miles in the cold rain because she claimed she couldn't afford bus money for me. I didn't argue. I didn't point it out. I just wrote it down. Every story, every brag, every lie that painted me as ungrateful while she poured herself into them, I collected it all. But fate has a way of helping when you finally stop looking the other way. One afternoon, while visiting, I walked past her office and noticed a stack of envelopes on her desk. She had stepped out to take a call, and curiosity pulled me closer. They were credit card bills, unopened and piled high with balances in the thousands. I felt my pulse quicken. She wasn't the perfect provider she pretended to be. She was drowning. And yet, she still made sure my siblings were spoiled while she borrowed money from me under the guise of helping the family. The hypocrisy was staggering. That night, I added another piece to my plan. Not only would I expose how she treated me, but I would make sure everyone saw the cracks in the image she worked so hard to protect. I didn't act right away. I knew timing mattered. Revenge isn't about explosions. It's about precision, about letting someone's own lies trap them until they collapse under the weight. So I kept collecting, kept smiling through family dinners, kept playing the quiet role. But inside, I was building a case stronger than any words I could speak. Because when the day came, I wouldn't just confront her. I would make sure the entire family and everyone who had ever envied her perfect life saw the truth laid bare. By the time summer rolled around, the tension in our family gatherings was almost electric, though no one said it out loud. My mother carried herself with the same smug grace she always had, orchestrating barbecues and birthday parties like she was hosting royalty. My siblings played their roles perfectly, laughing too loud, praising her cooking, showering her with compliments. I sat at the table, calm, smiling, but inside I was watching, listening, waiting. Because by then, I wasn't just the overlooked daughter anymore. I was holding years of evidence like ammunition. It was during my brother's birthday party that the first real crack showed. He bragged about a loan Mom had helped him with for his new apartment. He said it casually, beer in hand, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. My chest tightened. This wasn't a one-time thing. She was bleeding herself dry to keep them comfortable while shaming me for every request I had ever made. I asked softly, in front of everyone. Was that the same loan you asked me to cover for you last winter? The room went quiet for a moment. My mother's eyes snapped to mine, sharp and warning, but I didn't flinch. My brother laughed awkwardly, said I must have misunderstood, and changed the subject. But I noticed the flicker in my father's face, the way his brow creased. The first sign that maybe he was starting to question the story. That was when I realized the power of speaking just enough. Not everything. Not yet, but small doses of truth dropped at the right moments. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to accuse. I only had to plant seeds, let them grow in the cracks of her perfect facade. Every time I spoke, she grew tenser, more defensive, her mask slipping little by little. And the more she tried to laugh it off, the more people began to wonder what was really hiding behind that laughter. At night, I would go home and organize my files again, piecing together a timeline of every borrowed dollar, every false story, every favor that was twisted into a weapon against me. It was meticulous, obsessive, but it felt like taking back control of a narrative that had never been mine. My plan was no longer just a vague idea. It was becoming a map, and I was following it step by step. The question wasn't if I would use it, but when. And I knew the moment was coming faster than anyone expected. It all came to a head the following Christmas, exactly 1 year after she told me I was too old for gifts. The house looked the same as always. Garlands strung across the banister, the smell of cinnamon and cloves, music playing softly in the background. My siblings were already unwrapping their gifts, squealing with delight, while I sat in my usual spot on the couch, empty-handed. It should have stung, but this time it didn't. This time, I was ready. When the last piece of wrapping paper had been tossed aside, I cleared my throat and handed my mother a small box. She looked startled. She hadn't expected anything from me. "What's this?" she asked, her voice wary. I smiled. "It's something you've been wanting for years." She opened the box and pulled out a thick stack of papers tied with a red ribbon. At first she laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. But as she flipped through, her face drained of color. Inside was a record of every dollar she'd ever borrowed, every promise she'd broken, every receipt, every text message screenshot. $15,000 worth of debts neatly organized, with dates and signatures where she'd written her promises to pay me back. At the bottom was a note in my handwriting. "Merry Christmas. Consider this a reminder that Santa never forgets." The room went dead silent. My siblings stared, confused, until I began reading aloud. "January 14th, 500. I'll pay you back Friday. Never returned. May 22nd, Walwan 200. This is for the mortgage. Same week you bought Emily a designer purse. September 10th, 800. Car repairs. But Jason bragged about you paying his rent that month. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. My voice was steady, calm, cutting through the silence sharper than any scream. My mother sputtered, trying to interrupt, but I spoke louder, holding up each page so everyone could see. My father leaned forward, his face red, demanding to know if it was true. My siblings shifted uncomfortably, finally realizing the golden pedestal they stood on was built with my sacrifices. When my mother tried to laugh it off, I pulled out my phone and projected screenshots onto the TV, text threads, bank transfers, photos of the credit card bills I had stumbled upon. The evidence was undeniable. Her perfect image, the generous, selfless mother she flaunted online, shattered in seconds. She screamed that I was betraying the family, that I was cruel, but I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "I'm telling the truth. You've been lying to all of us for years. You call me ungrateful, but the truth is, you were never grateful for me. You used me." For the first time in my life, she had no comeback. My father pushed back his chair and walked out of the room. My siblings sat in stunned silence, no longer laughing. And my mother, the woman who had built her world on appearances, sat there holding the stack of papers, her hands trembling. That night, I left the house without looking back. I didn't take any leftovers, didn't hug anyone goodbye. I stepped into the freezing night air, the sound of her silence still ringing in my ears. And for the first time, Christmas didn't feel empty. It felt like freedom. The fallout began almost immediately. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages. My mother firing off long paragraphs about how cruel I was, how I had humiliated her in her own home, and how I had twisted the truth to make her look bad. My siblings chimed in too, but not in unison. My sister tried to defend her at first, saying I was being dramatic, that it was just money, that families help each other. But I replied with a screenshot of the purse she had bragged about online, dated the same week as one of Mom's emergencies. She went quiet after that. My brother, on the other hand, accused me of being jealous, of never being happy for anyone else. I didn't argue. I simply sent him a photo of the bank transfer where Mom had covered his rent with money she had claimed was for medical bills. He blocked me within the hour. The real surprise came from my father. That afternoon, he called me privately. His voice was low, weary, not angry. He asked if what I showed was real. I told him yes. I offered to email him the entire file. He sighed heavily, then admitted that he'd suspected something for years but had looked the other way because it was easier. He said he was ashamed. For once, I believed him. He didn't defend her. He didn't tell me to apologize. He just asked for time to process. Meanwhile, my mother's fury only grew. She posted online about how toxic children turn against their parents, fishing for sympathy. But instead of the flood of support she expected, people began asking questions. Some even messaged me directly, saying they had seen the photos and screenshots, and that they now understood my side. Her carefully curated image was unraveling in real time. And the more she tried to paint me as the villain, the more she revealed her desperation. At work, I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't carry the weight of silence anymore. Friends who had never known the details finally heard the story, and instead of pity, they offered respect. One even said, "You didn't just stand up to her, you ended the cycle." That stayed with me. Back at home, things got worse for my mother. Creditors started calling more often. She hadn't been able to hide her debts once Dad began digging through the bills. My sister, suddenly aware that the gravy train might dry up, started distancing herself. My brother grew resentful, realizing he might actually have to stand on his own. The perfect family she had built like a snow globe had cracked, and the pieces were falling apart in her hands. And me? I felt no guilt. For the first time, I celebrated Christmas in my own apartment, lights strung across the window, a tree glowing softly in the corner. I bought myself gifts with my own money, wrapped them, and opened them slowly, savoring the peace of knowing I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't hear her laugh echoing in my chest. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. I should have known she wouldn't take defeat quietly. By the time spring came, my mother had turned her humiliation into a campaign. She called every relative she could reach, cousins, aunts, old family friends, and spun her story that I had betrayed her, that I had fabricated lies, that I was twisting small misunderstandings to make her look bad. But the problem for her was simple. I had receipts. When one cousin texted me in shock, saying, "How could you do that to your own mother?" I sent her the same files, the same screenshots. Within hours, she apologized and admitted that she'd noticed strange things herself whenever my mother asked for money. Piece by piece, the walls closed in on her. She grew desperate. One evening, she showed up outside my apartment unannounced, banging on the door, demanding I open up. When I didn't, she yelled in the hallway, loud enough for neighbors to hear, screaming that I was ungrateful, that I was abandoning family, that I was heartless. I stayed silent, phone in hand, recording every word. Eventually, she left, but not before slipping a handwritten note under the door. "You may think you've won, but I will never forgive you. Families stick together. You will regret this." I kept the note. Another piece of evidence. My siblings reacted differently. My sister started calling less, her Instagram posts suddenly free of those perfect family captions. I could tell she was embarrassed to be associated with the drama. My brother, however, doubled down. He sent me a message dripping with anger. "You've ruined Christmas for all of us. I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. Because the truth was, I was happy, happier than I had been in years. I no longer needed their approval. The cracks in my mother's facade spread further. Her church community, the one she often boasted to about her sacrifices as a mother, started pulling away after whispers about her debts and favoritism reached them. She could feel her grip on the story slipping, and in desperation she tried one last tactic. She claimed she was sick. She told my siblings she had health issues, hinted at needing money for treatment, hoping they would step in where I had refused. But I had seen this playbook too many times. I warned them both. If she asks for money, ask for documentation. Don't hand her a cent until she shows you proof. My sister hesitated but listened. My brother scoffed, but even he began to notice inconsistencies in her stories. For the first time, the balance shifted. She was the one on the defensive, spinning lies faster than she could keep up with, while I stood calmly on solid ground. And yet, she still tried to wield that one word against me, ungrateful. But now, whenever I heard it, I didn't feel the sting of that Christmas morning. I felt only clarity. She had lost control of me, and she knew it. By the time the next holiday season rolled around, the balance of power in our family was unrecognizable. My mother was still trying, clinging to her performance, but her mask had cracked too many times. That year, she attempted one final act of control. She organized Christmas dinner as usual, invited everyone, and sent me a handwritten invitation with flowery words, "Family is forever. Let's heal together." But I knew her well enough to see the trap. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a stage. She wanted me back in her house, in her spotlight, so she could rewrite the story and cast herself as the forgiving matriarch, while painting me as the bitter daughter who finally came crawling back. I declined politely. "I'll be spending Christmas in my own home this year," I texted. Her reply came seconds later. "You'll regret this. No one respects a child who abandons her mother." I didn't bother answering. Instead, I decorated my own tree, invited close friends over, and filled my apartment with warmth that had nothing to do with her approval. For the first time in my life, Christmas actually felt like Christmas. But she wasn't finished. She tried to corner my father into taking her side, reminding him of all the years we raised her. But by then, he had seen too much. He had pored over the bills, seen the debts she hid, the lies she told. Quietly, almost without realizing it, he began pulling away from her. They stopped presenting as the perfect couple online. Photos of them together grew rare. For the first time, the cracks in their marriage were visible to the outside world. And then came her biggest mistake. In her desperation to smear me, she confided in a family friend, twisting the story so dramatically that even they became suspicious. The friend reached out to me directly, saying, Your mom told us some wild things. Do you have proof of what really happened? I didn't hesitate. I sent the full file. The debts, the receipts, the screenshots. Within days, the whispers spread faster than she could control. The woman who had once been admired for her devotion to her children was now known for exploiting one of them while spoiling the others. Her reputation, the very thing she had guarded like gold, was collapsing around her. That Christmas, while she sat at her table trying to pretend nothing had changed, I sat in my apartment, watching snow fall softly outside my window, surrounded by people who actually cared about me. For once, I didn't feel the urge to ask, "Where's my gift?" Because I already had it. The freedom of truth, the power of standing up for myself, and the knowledge that she could never laugh me into silence again. When spring arrived again, the echoes of that Christmas still hadn't faded. My mother tried to rally, as if she could rebuild the pieces of her reputation through sheer force of will. She began hosting small gatherings, inviting relatives and neighbors, overcompensating with decorations and extravagant meals. But there was a shift in the air. People came, but they didn't gush over her anymore. Their smiles were polite, their conversations short, and I knew they had already heard the truth. What she once wielded as power, the envy of others, was slipping through her fingers. I kept my distance, but she wouldn't let me go. One afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photo of me as a child, sitting by the Christmas tree, my siblings beside me surrounded by presents while I held a single book on my lap. On the back of the photo, in my mother's handwriting, were the words, "This is who you'll always be, empty-handed." For a moment, the old hurt pricked at my chest. But instead of breaking me, it fueled me. I tucked the photo into my file, another piece of evidence of the cruelty she thought she could hide. The next crack came when my sister finally called me, her voice small and uncertain. She admitted that Mom had started asking her for money too, more than once with conflicting stories. She asked if what I had said last year was true. I didn't gloat. I didn't lash out. I simply told her to check her own bank transfers and text messages, to pay attention. Silence filled the line before she whispered, "I think she's been using me too." For the first time, my sister wasn't my rival. She was a witness. My brother, though, dug his heels in deeper. He ranted online about selfish people who abandon family without naming me directly, but everyone knew. It didn't matter. His words bounced off me now. What once would have shredded me with guilt now only reminded me that he was still trapped in her spell, still clinging to the illusion that she would always provide. Meanwhile, my father began reaching out more often. Small things at first, an occasional phone call, a quiet lunch. He asked about my work, my life, things he had never asked before. He confessed that he had always known I was treated unfairly, but had convinced himself it was just how families are. I didn't absolve him, but I listened. And in his eyes, I saw regret that seemed real. My mother must have sensed the shift because her tactics grew sharper. She left voicemails accusing me of brainwashing the family against her, of destroying everything she built. But each time she spoke, her voice sounded less like authority and more like desperation. And I realized she wasn't the powerful figure I had feared my whole life. She was just a woman whose power only existed because I had once believed in it. And now, that belief was gone. By the time autumn came, it was clear my mother was unraveling. The perfect woman who once commanded every room with her forced laughter and curated image had turned into a desperate shadow of herself. She still hosted dinners, but fewer people came, and those who did arrived out of obligation, not admiration. The grand centerpieces she used to brag about looked more like frantic attempts to cover the empty seats around the table. I didn't attend, but I heard the whispers. Friends messaged me saying she looked tired and different. I knew what that meant. Her mask was slipping in public now, not just within our walls. Her campaign against me grew louder, almost hysterical. She called me at work one afternoon, screaming into the phone, accusing me of being possessed, of trying to destroy Christmas forever. I muted the call, let her words hang in the air, and then saved the voicemail into my folder. I didn't need to respond, her own voice was damning enough. When she realized I wouldn't play along, she pivoted again, this time reaching out to my extended relatives. She told them I had stolen money from her, that I was trying to blackmail her, that I was jealous of my siblings. But when one aunt asked for proof, she had none. I, however, sent her the full file. Thousands of dollars accounted for, every broken promise documented. Within a week, the whispers turned against my mother, and the narrative she tried so hard to control was gone. The unraveling became undeniable when my sister stopped defending her altogether. She called me one night crying, saying Mom had asked her for $3,000 for urgent bills, only to later find out Mom had spent the same week shopping online. "I think she's using me the same way she used you," she admitted through tears. I told her gently, "It's not about the money. It's about control. Once you see it, you can't unsee it." That conversation was a crack my mother could never seal. My sister stopped attending her events, and suddenly, my mother's golden girl was no longer shining on command. My father's distance grew wider, too. He no longer posted pictures with her, no longer defended her when she lashed out. Quietly, almost invisibly, he began siding with me, not publicly, but in the ways that mattered. He asked me to meet for coffee more often, started asking questions about my life. It was as if, in losing her grip on me, my mother had lost the very glue holding the family together. But my mother wasn't one to go down gracefully. In her final act of desperation, she tried to reclaim her power through the very stage she had always controlled. Christmas. She announced that she was hosting a massive holiday party, inviting not just family but neighbors, church members, anyone who would come. She decorated the house more extravagantly than ever, filled it with lights and wreaths, and posted online about how blessed she was to have such a loving family. It was her attempt to rewrite history, to drown out the truth with spectacle. But what she didn't know was that people no longer believed the show. They came, but their eyes lingered on the cracks, the tension between her and my sister, the forced smile on my brother's face, the absence of me at her side. And while she stood in that glittering house, clinging to her illusion, I sat in my own home, surrounded by friends who cared about me not for the image I projected, but for who I was. My tree glowed softly in the corner, my table filled with food I had cooked myself, and laughter filled the air, not the sharp, cutting kind that haunted my childhood, but the warm, genuine kind that made me feel seen. It was in that moment I realized the revenge was already complete. I didn't need to destroy her further. She had done it herself. By clinging so tightly to her lies, she had squeezed the life out of the very relationships she thought she controlled. Her downfall wasn't a single explosion. It was a slow unraveling, thread by thread, until nothing was left of the perfect image she valued more than her own children. And I, the daughter who once sat empty-handed by the Christmas tree, finally held everything I had ever wanted: peace, freedom, and the power of my own voice. That final Christmas came and went without me stepping foot in her house. I knew she was expecting me to show up, to play my part in her performance, but I chose something different. I woke up early, brewed coffee in silence, and sat by the window watching snow drift softly across the street. There were no stockings, no piles of gifts, no artificial laughter. Just me, my own small tree with ornaments I had chosen, and the warmth of peace filling a space that once would have felt unbearably empty. I thought of all the years I had begged, silently or aloud, to be seen. The years I had asked for scraps of affection and been told to be grateful. The years of humiliation wrapped in tinsel and bows, laughter used as a weapon, love rationed like it was something I had to earn. And I realized I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need her approval, her attention, or her stage. What I needed was the freedom to define myself without her voice echoing in my chest. Meanwhile, word of her parties began to reach me through others. The crowds had thinned. The neighbors came, but no one stayed late. My sister stopped attending altogether, and my brother, still bitter, sat through dinners with his eyes on his phone. My father no longer played along with her illusion, showing up because he had to, not because he wanted to. And she, the woman who had built her life around appearances, found herself presiding over a table filled with silence where there used to be performance. It was never about me ruining Christmas. It was about her ruining the meaning of family long ago. And everyone was finally seeing it. I kept my journals, my files, my evidence, not to use against her anymore, but as a reminder that I had survived, that I had seen the truth clearly when everyone else was blinded by her show. A reminder that I had broken the cycle, that I had chosen to step out of the role of the unwanted child and into the life of someone who refuses to settle for scraps. My revenge wasn't loud or explosive. It was simple. It was living well without her. It was taking back my holidays, my peace, my sense of worth. Now, every December, I light my own tree and buy myself the gift she never gave me: joy. I no longer ask, "Where is my gift?" because I already know the answer. My gift is the life I've built away from her control, the laughter of friends who actually care, the knowledge that I will never again let someone define me with a cruel laugh and a careless word. My gift is freedom, and to every woman listening to this, who has ever felt invisible at her own family's table, I want to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have finally stood up and taken back your voice?